Modern action films are the cinematic equivalent of peaks and valleys, covering many genres and settings. They can be intensely gratifying one moment and massively forgettable the next. For every John Wick and Mission Impossible, we often have 3 or 4 throwaway efforts. Over the last 6 years, however, the action genre has found itself a new kind of footing, well-choreographed, stylized combat, or gritty thrillers based on real events. One of the earliest efforts to adopt this focus was The Raid, directed by Welsh director Gareth Evans. Released in 2011, it was met with an excellent reception upon release for introducing audiences to a new kind of hand-to-hand combat. Hailing from Indonesia, Pencak Silat is a rapid mixture of offensive, defensive, and evasive movements designed to quickly incapacitate an opponent. Like any martial art, it requires years of study and practice, and has been a regular fixture in Asia for hundreds of years. Yet, to most moviegoers under the Hollywood system, it had rarely been seen or experienced. That changed at the turn of the 2010s, as many an audience was utterly blown away by the original film's release. Standing at a stark contrast to the widespread critical acclaim was the late film critic Roger Ebert. In his 2012 review of the movie, he said, "This film is about violence, all violence, wall-to-wall violence. Against many of those walls, heads are pounded again and again into a pulpy mass. If I estimated the film has 10 minutes of dialogue, that would be generous." Many years ago, in the early days of my blog, I wrote a post entitled 5 Ways The Raid and The Raid 2 Put Modern Hollywood Action Films to Shame, which did have its share of recognition from the Indonesian community. Upon first viewing, I was speechless at how well the action was handled, especially when compared to what we were getting in the West at the time. This raises an interesting question. Can an action film get by on its set pieces alone? Many of the best genre entries in film history have succeeded because you're invested in the narrative as well as the fight scenes. The two flicks came to be through a trip Gareth Evans took to Indonesia to film a documentary about martial arts. After meeting leading actor Iko Uwais, the director started laying plans to make a full-on film. Through the use of the Panasonic AF100 camera attached to a fig rig, the crew were able to craft visceral and crisp fight scenes that were always fully visible from start to finish. This is where much of the duology's acclaim came from, and really stood out from all the shaky cam nonsense of the time. With that said, let's examine the story. It's incredibly simple. A platoon of police officers enter a notorious high-rise block in the slums of Jakarta to bring a crime lord to justice. Entering into criminal territory, the operation quickly turns into a vicious room-by-room battle. And that's it. That's the extent of the story. Cue an hour and 40 minutes of some of the most bloodthirsty fight scenes you'll ever see. The intensity is palpable as Rama alternates between fighting and fleeing, with dialogue kept to an absolute minimum. The pacing is breathless and unceasing, the fights endlessly gruesome. Yet across the film's runtime, the wider implications of the police mission and the motivations for each participant can feel rather shallow by comparison. It's a simple case of attack and defend between the two sides. We only learn the truth about the operation and the behind-the-scenes corruption in the film's final moments. This is most evident when Rama peels off from his comrades after a relentless assault on a drug lab. The final fight between Rama, his older brother Andy, and Mad Dog is one of the bloodiest and most grueling encounters in any modern movie. It lasts a full 8 minutes and took 8 whole days to shoot. A truly excellent fight scene in terms of sheer spectacle. Perhaps the most insane moment is how Mad Dog continues to fight, even with a glass bulb stuck in his neck. Yet in terms of story and plot progression, what does it really offer? The police lieutenant has broken off to reach the top of the complex, so the narrative effectively comes to a stop, and from here, Mad Dog is an obstacle the protagonist has to defeat. We also know little about him, other than how he's one of the antagonist's closest lieutenants. The overarching point Roger Ebert made with his review was that when story and characters take a back seat, the violence on display becomes gratuitous and excessive. Yet it's not a complete write-off. At several points you can see the genuine fear on the characters' faces, and this is most notable when Rama and his comrade Boal hide in a wall. The way the machete barely misses the protagonist's face and how the two are forced to remain completely silent is a seriously white-knuckled moment. This is what places the films above your more run-of-the-mill outings. The protagonist does have one connection in the building, and that's his older brother, though the film needed an extra scene or two to build a stronger connection between them. Capable performances and blistering action made The Raid resonate with audiences worldwide, and its success would prompt a sequel. 3 years on, Evans would address some of the narrative-based criticisms, bolting on some more backstory to Rama as he re-enters the criminal underworld. The Raid 2 stems from a repurposed script called Barandal, which is sometimes included as a subtitle for the production. On the whole, an increased sense of scale and higher count of players involved is a central focus. Often the action will pull away from Rama and introduce us to some of the major adversaries he'll have to tackle. This sense of build-up is an extension on Mad Dog's first appearance in the original film. While it does show off the ferocity of these assassins, we never learn of their individual backstories. With that said, Rama himself does have a more compelling reason to enter the fray this time around. When his brother is murdered by the new crime boss, his family is put in danger. This prompts a re-entry into the world of crime. In the original film, the fight was from the bottom of one building all the way up to its peak. This time around, things are more hierarchical, making for a more cohesive sense of progression. The prison fight is the sequence that really pulls the audience in, but this time around it connects more to the wider narrative. Rama is not only fighting to defend himself here, but also defending an imprisoned gangster. This wins him the favour of the criminal underworld, allowing him to venture in deeper as an undercover operative. From here, the film is able to broaden its action offering, the most notable being a fight inside a car, placed against a chase through the streets. It's frankly staggering how the filming crew were able to craft a chaotic scene so precisely. In doing so, the interplay between the crime mobs also receives greater attention. The aforementioned assassins are shown to spark a gang war, thus triggering much of the danger our leading man finds himself in. If there's one piece that sticks out, it's the scenes with Yahya and Ruhian. With Mad Dog executed in the previous film, he plays a different character here, and while his scenes do get across a massive ruthlessness, it feels as if the producers were looking for an excuse to bring him back for another run. Even with these gaps in its story, the performances remain strong across the board. This time around, there's a feeling of exhaustion within Iko's portrayal, especially when we reach the third act. Once he reaches the restaurant, the film goes all in on its choreographed action. Again, it's an incredible fight. The 2-to-1 battle in the hallway and the use of both blunt and bladed weapons really ups the stakes of the encounter. But again, it doesn't really tell us anything we don't know already. All 4 fighters are incredibly skilled at what they do, and the actors all train tirelessly for our viewing entertainment. But when you have names like Baseball Batman, Hammer Girl, and the Assassin, it's obvious they're really not a part of the wider picture. Perhaps The Raid 2 could have built up a deeper rivalry or vendetta between them and Rama, further connecting the characters and making these final encounters go beyond a primal impact. While fans may have wished for it, The Raid 3 never happened, as Gareth Evans moved on to Rogue One, a Star Wars story, 2 years later. In summary, The Raid and The Raid 2 are highly enjoyable and incredibly well produced, but they do lose their impact on repeated viewings, especially for the original film. That raw impact you felt on the first viewing is lessened quite a bit on the third or fourth run through. What makes a film beloved to this day is how every component comes together brilliantly. The reason we remember the likes of Indiana Jones and Die Hard is because their stories and characters were every bit as engaging as the action itself. While Rama does possess a sense of vulnerability, his character doesn't go much deeper than that. The Raid 2 did improve things somewhat by delving into his personal background, but as an entire package, some of the motives behind the fight scenes are still lacking. While the Raid films came to an end in 2014, they set the template for other releases to follow in their footsteps. Most notably, the 2018 release of The Night Comes For Us from Timo Tjahjanto marked a big step forward for this style of martial arts film, providing further depth in its narrative and making its characters more well-rounded. It's set to expand into a trilogy in the years to come. For now, the action genre's recent resurgence is great to see, and it wouldn't have been possible without the work of Gareth Evans and his team. When it came to crafting great action, these guys showed the suits at Hollywood how it was done, and brought their new style kicking and screaming to the big screen. Thanks for watching. Looking back on the Raid movies a decade after their release, it's interesting to examine some alternative perspectives. Do you still enjoy them both today? Which of the two do you prefer? Stick your thoughts in the comments below. You can follow my blog and channel at the links in the description.